We've got tips and recipes for healthy living. So for fun and inspiration, come and join us in the raw food world.
Welcome everybody, this is Matt Monarch with the Raw Food World TV show. And people are loving the videos that we do together because it's kind of hilarious. We got another special guest here. We got Daniel Vitalis again.
Hello everybody at the Raw Food World.
Thanks for coming on.
I love to.
Cool. And there's Gila.
Hello.
Hi. Okay, but fruit, you said was not meant for man.
Ooh, that's a really good question. Okay.
Is that true?
Is that true? Interesting. All right, I get attacked on the internet all the time by the fruitarian community. And there's certain writers of certain fruits that like to say terrible things about me. And so, I'm a little sensitive around the fruitarian issue because I started in my raw food journey years ago as a fruitarian. So I have a lot of experience eating fruit. And I assumed that the fruits that I was eating were natural foods. I wasn't saying that fruits, and I don't say anything like fruits aren't natural for man. What I'm saying is that the fruits people are eating today are as hybridized from their wild state as chihuahuas are from wolves. Understand a chihuahua is a wolf. It shares the genome of all dogs which come from wolves. It's Canis lupus familiaris is its species. In the same way, bananas today are like the chihuahua of fruits. Bananas today contain no seeds. They're sterile mutants. In fact, the modern banana was invented in the 1800s. Previous to the yellow banana was the red and green banana that were cooking bananas and weren't eaten raw. And previous to that was the wild banana that is riddled with seeds and barely edible. That could grow in nature, but it was much more like a berry. Apples started off over in Eastern Europe, and they began as like a smaller berry kind of fruit, and the apples we eat today are clones. I don't know about you guys, but I feel weird about eating cloned food. Do you know that bananas today are all clones, and if it's not a clone, it's grown from a tissue culture in a lab? You can't go buy a yellow banana today that was grown from a seed because they have no seeds. They're unnatural foods. And if you really are what you eat, if you eat sterile hybrids, then, well, so the idea is not that fruits aren't natural for man, it's that when we think of fruits, we're thinking of the apples and oranges and pears and all of these things that human beings have been breeding and breeding and breeding for so many generations now that they scarcely resemble often the fruits that they come from. I eat fruits all the time. In fact, just before I came here to the Longevity Now conference, I was at home in Maine, and it was the peak of the autumn berry season, or the autumn olive, which is an amazing berry that's abundant on the trees there. And I harvested pounds and pounds of that, and I'm going to eat that. That's a wild food. What I know about real fruits is that they're smaller than we think, they're less sugary than we think, they have far more seed material because the real reason a tree produces a fruit is to propagate itself. Feeding us is secondary. Fruits are for man, but supermarket fruits are freaky mutations. And it doesn't mean they're not occasionally okay for us, but it hardly makes sense to eat a diet of completely sterile hybrid foods and then go around telling everybody that's the most natural diet for us. That's just crazy. It's actually completely unnatural. So I believe fruits are fantastic, but I like to focus on things like wild blueberry and autumnberry and the fruits that are the most natural. And if I'm going to eat hybrid fruits, I try to eat fruits with seeds in them that could actually propagate themselves. Human beings are becoming sterile really quickly. We are what we eat.
Yeah, we get attacked in the fruitarian community also, pretty big time. And we were hanging out in Ecuador. We went on a big hike, and we hit a banana tree. We took a banana. These were it was just inundated with black, hard seeds.
You had a wild banana.
Yeah, it was like,
amazing.
It was like, they were huge seeds, you know what I mean? Yeah, it wasn't sweet.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
All right, great. So this is exactly what I'm talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, there's the people out there who go around bashing people about what they eat and talk about how they live on the most natural diet, biogenic diet, and they haven't really looked at the anthropology, they haven't really looked at the paleonutrition, they haven't really studied what ancestral cultures eat, indigenous cultures eat, hunter-gatherer societies eat. They're just sitting around making stuff up based on their supermarket shopping and then coming around attacking us, and we're just like them out there just trying to share what we know, share our hearts with people, And ultimately, my path has led me further and further down the path of hunter-gatherer people. And my personal goal is to become a hunter-gatherer because I think that's the most natural diet for people, and I can bear that out with evidence from how human beings have lived on the planet for 200,000 years.
Wow, so sugar is pretty much like, we're not really meant for that much sugar, it
Well, you
seems
know
like.
what's interesting is that human beings all through nature, when I say that, I mean the wisdom cultures, the indigenous cultures, their most prized food in many places in the world is honey. The reason is because honey is the densest source of calories in nature. You can't actually find anything in nature as dense in calories as honey. So if you go interview people in indigenous cultures, they'll tell you their favorite food is honey. But you can't get it every single day. We live in such opulent abundance now that you could eat exclusively honey all day long, only if you wanted to, and you could, because there's enough. But in nature, there's checks and balances so that you maybe can take from a hive once a year, right? And they have ways of getting into the hive and taking that. You know, chimpanzees do the same thing. Chimpanzees bash hives open with big sticks, and they take honey too, and they like it a lot, but they can't have it every day. There's obviously sweet carbohydrate in berries and naturally occurring fruits, and we would eat those, but that was only in their season. You couldn't live on a, say, I don't know, let me throw out a random number, 80% carbohydrate diet, because that wasn't really around then. So people ate a higher than 10% percentage of fats because that was the primary fuel for us in a lot of ways. And I really think fats are a very important fuel. We live in a culture where we have so much calories available to us that we try to find ways to get low-calorie food, and we try to find ways to burn calories off extra ones. In indigenous cultures around the world and animals in nature are constantly looking, how can they get more calories? The quest all day long is for calories. The idea to an indigenous person of trying to burn off extra calories is just, that's insane. That doesn't even make sense to them. So we're really in a unique position here. But fat has more than double the amount of calories that are in carbohydrate. So in nature, if you can get fats, that's actually the most valuable source of fuel. And what I like about fats is you don't get the spike of sugar and then the crash that follows it. And I know that some of those people out there are going to be like, oh, there's no crash if you just keep eating the sugar all the time. What ends up happening is it's called glycation, and burning sugar is called glycation, and burning fat is called ketosis. And burning fat is just a much more balanced and stable way to do it. I'll use this analogy. When you burn sugar as a fuel, like glucose, it's like you have a fire going and you throw a piece of paper on it. You get a flash and then it's gone. If you burn complex carbohydrates like grains, it's like you've taken some kindling and you've thrown it on the fire. It burns less bright than the paper, but it burns longer. But eating fat is like taking a log and putting that log on the fire. And that log won't burn super bright, but it will burn long, all night. And it's like that. We eat sugar, it's like bang, and then you crash. You eat complex carbohydrate, you get lit up a little bit, and it lasts a little while, and then you crash. But when you eat fat, you never really peak out. You just have stable energy levels. And with, what ends up happening to people on high sugar diets is spike, crash, spike, crash, spike, crash, spike, crash, hypoglycemic roller coaster. And I think it's really dangerous for the body. And not just dangerous because of the blood sugar problems, but the associated problems with other organs like the adrenal glands. So, again, there's people out there just making stuff up about nutrition, and if you're curious what's really natural for people, I'd recommend you take a look at paleonutrition and you look at indigenous cultures, because the real question, if you want to know what the natural diet of dogs was, you don't look at what dogs eat today. You don't go to the supermarket and look at all the dog food available and try to guess which one. You look at what wolves eat. That's the natural dogs. You'd see what they ate. You don't have to guess. You don't know what people eat. Just go to the source. Look at what cultures around the world eat.
So I want to know, can I ask one more fruit if you know the past about it?
Yeah.
Figs.
Figs were actually a very ancient, oh yeah, you got a fig thing, don't you?
Yeah.
Totally. Figs are an ancient fruit. In fact, they're one of the fruits like pomegranates that we know from some of the most ancient writings. We know that figs have been around a really, really long time. And figs still have those viable seeds inside of them. So I think figs are a pretty good option. I'm going to give you the thumbs up on the figs.
They're pretty sweet though.
They are pretty sweet, and that's because we've hybridized them. And what I'd recommend if you were a fig fanatic, I don't know if you are, Matt, would be on your piece of property as you're growing, doing your permaculture there, when you are looking at what variety you want to grow, you basically have a lot of options. And I
Sure.
would look for the most natural fig to grow. And I would also, it's the same if you're going to grow an apple at your house. You know, there's 500 varieties of apples. You get to choose what you're going to grow. And you don't have to choose the biggest, sugariest one. You can choose something that makes sense and has strong genetics because it's closer to the source. And by saying that, I mean the strength of the genetics of a German Shepherd are much closer. They're much closer to the wolf than the Chihuahua. It's a bit of a further, more shallow into the gene pool. So
Right.
with fruits, it's about the same thing. How close can you get, and how viable are its seeds? I think figs are a pretty good fruit. And I'm not saying sweet fruits didn't exist in nature. They just didn't exist 365 days with spikes of sugar and no seeds.
Right on.
What
Okay.
about grapes with seeds?
Yeah, now I live in a place where grapes grow wildly and ferally. I live in New England, and we have these feral grapes and we have wild grapes. And they're extremely tart and very acidic. The kind of acid where you feel like, ooh, if I leave that on my teeth too much, they're going to kind of pull away at the calcium carbonate in my teeth. And, and they are not sugary. Those grapes that you get at the supermarket and they have no seed in them, that's how you know they're cloned or grafted. No seed in them and are really high in sugar. There's little sugar balls. So grapes, again, it's not, we can't say, oh, grapes are good or grapes are bad. What grapes are we talking about? The Concord grape where I live is fantastic. I like that. And in fact, I'm using that at home now as we speak. So I think it's a fantastic food. It's an ancient food. The leaf is also a really great food. We could have had this exact same conversation about vegetables, by the way. It's the same thing is
Right.
true about our vegetables. The point is really, are we eating foods from nature, or are we eating Star Trek kind of foods that were grown on the Enterprise? Where are they from? My goal is to be as indigenous as I can because I want my offsprings to be part of the planet. And the way people are living right now and the breeding selections, the genetic selections that come after we've bred, it's like we're selecting for some kind of Futurama world that takes place on a spaceship devoid of the elements. When we eat foods that don't live naturally in the ecosystem, we don't see what goes into growing those foods. But here's what happens. If you have a food that's not from nature, because it's been bred by people, it requires some measure to keep it alive. The reason you have to pesticide, herbicide, and fungicide these plants is because they have all kinds of sugar and nothing to no immune system in the form of bitter principles to combat insects eating them. It makes perfect sense. So if you're going to try to grow organically, that's really difficult. The reason organic farming is not easy is because the plants we're growing aren't really from nature, so we have to find some way to keep everything around from eating it, because if you're an insect and you go to eat a dandelion, it tastes too bitter to them to eat very much of. But if they can find something high in sugar with nothing bitter in it, they're going to eat as much as they can and they're going to wipe it out. That's their job, to take away weak plants. So we end up spending a lot of energy, pesticide, herbicide, fencing, doing all kinds of crazy things to try to keep these weak Chihuahua-type plants alive on Earth. And it's funny because hunter-gatherers worked an average of 12 to 18 hours per week, and the rest of their life was leisure.
Wow.
We work 40 to 80 hours a week, and our life is toil. And one of the biggest questions that is asked in anthropology is, why would we ever leave a life of gathering to work harder and have weaker bodies? Because as soon as we started farming, we developed arthritis, we developed smaller, more beat-up skeletons. We can see in the skeletal record that farming destroyed our bodies, and we had to work 40 plus hours. We have to work sunrise to sunset as farmers. So it doesn't even make sense. And my goal is to eat food from nature as much as I can because I feel better. I feel more connected to the earth. I know the nutrition's better because I know my offspring will have genetic traits selected for living on earth, and I don't have to be part of this insane agriculture that's decimating the planet.
Wow. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Ready for another video right after this?
Yes.
Okay.
After a sip of water.
Okay, cool. All right, so I guess no press is bad press, right? And we'll see you again tomorrow with Daniel Vitalis. Later.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again. at the Raw Food World.